Hi guys, what is going on, and welcome back to another video on Amazon's New World. So we've really only just got about a month to go now to close beta, which is pretty goddamn exciting, and we have just had the June patch notes drop. Now, if you can remember back to the last patch notes, they actually stated that they didn't intend to add any more new content prior to release, but instead they were going to focus on bug fixes, balance changes, and sort of gameplay mechanic improvements. And that really seems to have followed through, and that seems to really be the focus for this update. And they've gone with this pretty impressive opening claim to have fixed 1,209 bugs, although how big or small these bugs actually were is kind of unclear. But for me, one of the bigger changes from this patch is the company limit change. So they've basically gone from a maximum guild size of 50 up to 100, which is honestly a really welcome change. I think this is something that they could absolutely have just done ages ago, particularly as I'm sure quite a lot of guilds have already been recruiting, planning, preparing for the beta and release, and 50 members is just really too small. I think you're just going to end up with a situation where there's going to be XY Guild 1, XY Guild 2, and they're just going to end up with XY Guild 7, just to make a decent sized guild. So in changing it to a 100 member limit is definitely a step in the right direction. We then move on to progression, XP gain and territory standing, where we've undergone some pretty significant balance changes. Firstly, they kind of talk about how they felt players were levelling up too quickly in the alpha, and that they want to be slowing this down a bit to kind of allow players to fully explore the world, get stuck into the quests a little bit more, etc. And I kind of agree. People were able to max out to level 60 within just a couple of weeks, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy for the long term of the game. So the devs have basically increased the XP required to level up after level 7 by about 40%. We also see a nerf to some of the more classic ways, I guess, to grind levels, such as things like Corrupted Breachers, seeing a 10 to 20% XP reduction, and a doubling of their respawn time. Faction and PvP missions also saw a pretty big nerf to their XP gains, as kind of the developers felt players were able to really run through them rather quickly, and pick up some pretty decent rates of XP gain, or at least higher than intended. Although we did see a small amount of buff to XP gain for finding points of interest, and reading the lore notes, so better get finding those little blue bits of paper when walking around the open world. I think this is really trying to drive players back to doing more of the quest line. I guess that's really, in the previous patches, particularly with things like the voiceover acting and stuff, that's really where they were trying to drive the player base. And I think some of these extra areas where players were just sort of grinding from level 20 to level 60, just doing the same thing, wasn't really what they had in mind. So I think they're trying to balance some of the rates of XP gain to sort of slightly funnel people back to some of the quest side of things. At least that's kind of the impression I get from them. This then kind of nicely leads us on to loot and gear. And this is perhaps the only new stuff they really seem to be actually adding into the game. But they claim to have added around 50 new armor sets into the game, as well as updated visuals, stats and perks for the many unique weapons and armor sets that can already be found in the game, with found in modes like invasions, wars, corrupted breaches, arenas, expeditions, basically all the kind of side game modes. They also added a couple of new armor sets for things like trade skills and gathering, which probably aren't going to add much in the way of combat benefits, but are certainly going to help you with your crafting, perks to the rate of gathering, buffs to trade skills, so you're going to be able to craft that high-end armor a little bit easier. But to kind of briefly go a little bit off topic, and to kind of hop back to those 50 new armor sets and visuals that they're adding into the game, I'm not really very much of a fan of the style. I'll throw up a few images now so you can sort of see a little bit what I'm talking about, but I really feel like it's almost a bit of a non-style. I particularly dislike the second from the left. It almost looks like a Fortnite character. I feel like they've just taken almost random bits of armor set from different styles and games and just sort of thrown them together. And it's not that they're badly made from a developer point of view in terms of how they've been constructed. I just don't like the style. I'd be really interested to hear what you guys think about this though as well. Do you like the visual style? I just think, for me, yeah, really not a fan. I would really rather see slightly more... I know realistic isn't quite the right word. We are in a fantasy game with magic, but slightly more gritty, I think, would be a lot better. Some of the existing armor sets we've had in game prior to these ones that have been introduced, for me, are far better, and I'm really not a fan of this kind of new style that they seem to be going in. On the smaller end of the scale, we're seeing some changes to the UI, with kind of an updated main menu and UI system, along with a much more streamlined character creation, with significantly more appearance options kind of being made available. Kind of good they're updating that. The character creation options were kind of a little bit limited. Furthermore, the world selection process has been streamlined, although you can thankfully still go into like an advanced mode and actually manually select the right world you're on. And interestingly, I noticed that they talk about queue times for server access. Perhaps not really a great surprise that that was going to be the system, but it's kind of interesting to see that that is going to be the case. You know, hopefully we don't end up with kind of like an arcade where you have to queue for 10 hours just to get into the right server to be able to play with your friends. But not only the main menu UI that got updated, we have even seen some combat UI updates as well, with much clearer status effects, damage effectiveness and damage type. But it's also not just visually that combat is getting updated. Dodge is now moved from space to shift, with space becoming basically a jump key. And sprinting is now going to be automatic rather than having to sort of hold shift to do it. Although we still thankfully have the auto run feature, thank God. There will, however, be a few seconds delay between combat and sprinting. So if you use swing your great axe, then there's going to be a 1.5 second delay before your character will start sprinting again. And if you get hit by a melee weapon, there's going to be a 2-second delay before you start sprinting again. So in effect, it should be a small nerf to ranged players, because effectively they shouldn't be able to just sort of run away or evade your melee classes quite as easily as they probably have done in the current build. So yeah, I think that's kind of a nice little tilter towards making melee a little bit more effective. Recovery after block break has also been nerfed, sort of preventing you from dodging or blocking for 3 seconds. Stamina reset time gets doubled, and you can't block anymore with 0 stamina. On top of this, we also get a good chunk of balancing for each of the weapon classes. I won't bore you all to death by running through each one individually. I've probably already done that with the rest of the video, but it is actually pretty good to see each patch bringing changes to weapon balance, because it shows the devs at Amazon are actually keeping an eye on the performance data from the alpha and are trying to create this sort of level playing field between the classes. Whether they're succeeding, I guess we'll find out more once we hit closed beta, but I think it is at least a good thing. But anyway, that really covers the patch notes for June so far. Hopefully you've kind of enjoyed the video and found it informative. Would be interesting to hear what you guys think in the comments down below, particularly about the attire style. That's the one I think I'm most interested in. Do you like the kind of current style that they're using? Because for me, I'm really not much of a fan. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel for, of course, lots more New World content, and I shall see you all on the next one.